Well, hello everybody, my name's Jeremy Taylor and welcome to Wednesday Night Undressed, or as we like to call it, Old Farts Undressing. Okay, it was supposed to be Old Farts Complaining, but I just thought Old Farts Undressing was better. Everybody remembers the time when they discovered that their parents were not always right. What did you discover when you started to ask questions, and how has that changed your life? Everyone remembers the time when they discovered that their parents were not always right. What did you discover when you started to ask questions, and how has that changed your life? Kathleen?
I'm still trying to deal with this concept that my parents weren't always right. Sorry.
Well, you're still terrified of your mother. So, all right, do you want me to ask somebody else?
Yes, please.
Honestly, I think I learned about my parents is that they're people, and they screw up just like everybody else, and they're not perfect.
Oh, bollocks. When did you find out that your father was wrong about something, or your mum?
I found out when I was in high school.
Right.
Yeah, I found out all about the lies they told me and what they really did.
Yes, let's get to the truth.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was good because then they could tell me all kinds of things, and I'd say, really? You're getting angry at me for doing this? And I know for a fact that you did the exact same thing when you were younger than me.
Right.
And
your parents never had sex, right? And then
never.
You find out that they did.
They never had
they used to
sex,
like
and never
rabbits.
used drugs,
yeah,
nothing.
Absolutely, yeah. Evo?
Well, that's a weird question. I don't know. I guess I was like everybody else when the hormones hit, in the teenage years. You start questioning everything, and you start questioning your parents' authority. And I think that's where it happens for everybody. But for me, I did not rebel until maybe I was 14, 15. And I started looking for trouble and to go partying and drinking and started disregarding my parents' directives. But
as you're growing up, your father and mother, I've met your mother, nice lady.
Yeah.
Your father was a lecturer, or still is. He's a professor. He's a stunt actor. He does all sorts of things. But when did you suddenly one day wake up one morning and think,
it's gone.
Dad, I mean, you never thought of that because you'd be thinking in Bulgarian. But if you were translated,
with my father, I think I'm gonna start questioning him eventually. But he's
cleverer than you are.
He's freaking ridiculous. I mean, Jeremy, he's a nuclear physicist, a stuntman, a judo champion of the country 6 times, a boxing champion of the country. He's the most legendary stuntman in the country to this day. He's a professor in biomechanics. As a nuclear physicist, he was irradiated with a deadly dose of radiation. He's basically like a Marvel character. He didn't turn into Spider-Man.
That you know about.
Yeah, that I know about. But he was exposed to deadly dose of radiation from an isotope in our nuclear laboratory just outside of Sofia. He survived that. They said he's going to die within a year from radiation sickness. No, his hair didn't even fall out. He's a freak of nature. I can't question this guy.
Just to tell
your dad is Superman, isn't he?
Evo's dad story. So I go to Bulgaria, and Evo gets his dad to drive us around to different parts of the country.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
So...
oh, geez, that was scary, yeah.
Now, yes, like a normal person would be scary just from the way that we're driving. Like, literally, we are on mountain roads, two-lane mountain roads, like zooming in and out between semis on this road. And Evo's dad says something to Evo, and I don't know what he says. And Evo just kind of laughs nervously.
Yeah.
And then he turns to me. Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, I think I know what you're referring to. I think I remember it too, because I told him that the guests are kind of worried about his driving, and he said, I am a stuntman. I only know how to crash cars. I only know how to drive dangerously. I really never learned to drive safely. So, he currently is 77 years old. Last year, in the winter,
76.
Yeah, he dropped at the age of 76, just before turning 77 in February. He dropped a 400-pound weight while he was bench pressing. He dropped it on his head and cut his head open. He called me from the emergency room on FaceTime, was laughing. And he was covered, he was like bleeding. And they actually came with an ambulance to the fitness club where he was lifting weights. And to transport him, because he was bleeding, they thought that he cracked his skull. Apparently, he managed to push the weight off of his face, so it only cut his eyelid. But there's a lot of capillaries in the eyelid, so he was bleeding profusely. And they stitched him up. And then he was calling me from the emergency room, looking like hell, and laughing, and at the same time being really pissed off. He says, I'm really mad. And I'm like, why are you mad? He said, I got the best surgeon. And he stitched me up so good that he told me it's not going to leave a scar. It's like, I would love to have this awesome scar on my face. And so this 77 crazy man, a nuclear physicist, I still to this day have not beaten him in chess. So how am I going to question? I mean, this is a long shadow. I'm having hard time even today trying to get out of that shadow and start questioning him.
Chris Major.
Well, it began in junior high when they failed to pay my allowance, even though we set up a really nice system that said take out the trash on Tuesdays and you can do the dishes on Wednesdays and Fridays and Sundays. And it ended when I found their marijuana stash in my dad's sock drawer.
Oh!
Obviously an excellent gentleman, Lyn.
Yeah. So I mean, why would you question him? I'm sorry. Why would you? That's like a.
Well, it began. I mean,
you started even looking up to him even more. Like,
that's what you say. My dad's awesome.
Yeah. Did you go in and say, "Hey, Dad, hey, man"?
No, I didn't say anything at that point. I was a little stupid at that point, so I knew what I had found, but I didn't even take a little at that point to try at that point because I hadn't even ever smoked at that point. But
you gotta Dad, I found your marijuana collection. Where is your Playboy collection?
Oh, I'd found that already.
So that's when you take the stash and go, if you don't want me to say anything to Mom about this, let's roll one up right now.
No, I think Mom knew about it too.
Yeah, because she was the one that went and bought the Cheech and Chong albums.
Because they had her Valium in there as well.
When did you discover that maybe you had a different take on life to your parents?
Oh, pretty earlier.
Really?
Yeah, I don't really want my life to be like that, so.
No, so did you make a decision? I mean, was it something that was conscious, or did you just sort of slide into it?
I think just slide into that.
Yeah.
Wait, in your culture,
right?
Is it accepted to question your parents like early?
No, not really. No.
No, I'm not suggesting actually questioning them. It's just you go, yeah, right. Because I think through your teenage years, you're rebelling against your parents anyway. So whatever they say, you're going to go in the opposite direction. But as you get a little bit older, and you perhaps say it's to do with investments or something, you may take the view, Dr. Orlando.
I got a long-winded story. I apologize ahead of time, but it will get to a point. So I grew up in a very, very strict, almost, some people would call it a cult, Christian cult, Jehovah's Witness. That was the religion that I grew up in. So one of the things that the Jehovah's Witnesses are very, very keen on is making sure that you know what is a sin and what isn't a sin. And they do that by rigorous Bible study. We would go 5 nights a week to study the Bible. And this started when I'm going to say, my mom had kind of always been doing it, but it was mandated by the church that you get your entire family involved. So I got involved with studying the Bible probably at the age of 7 or so. I remember almost to the day, I remember where I was sitting in the whole shebang, where I was sitting when we came across what people kind of bastardize as the 7 deadly sins. There's a set of scriptures in the Bible where it says, these are the things that God truly hates. And one of these words was fornicator. And I didn't know what that was and just didn't think to ask about it at the time. So, I go to the dictionary like any 7-year-old kid would, I think, and look up fornication and realize that it is sex and not real sure what sex is. So I get out the encyclopedia and find out what sex is. What I knew but didn't fully comprehend was that I was being abused up until then. And so do you mean physically abused or mentally abused? I mean sexually abused.
Right.
So I read this, and what I read in my 7-year-old understanding was that God hated me. So, my mom was involved in this religion that she involved all of us in, that told me that I was hated by God. That's not what the religion said. That was what my 7-year-old mind took from these things that I'd pieced together. So because of all of those things, I started, well, let's just say going to church 5 nights a week was not the funnest time in my life, from about 7 to about 15. But that was the reality that I knew. That was all that I knew. And my mom and, adults around you tend to reinforce this notion that, it is the bad kids that are having sex. That's just not something that the good kids do. So that went on, quite honestly, until that weekly reinforcement that I was hated by God. And it didn't matter what the people in the church were saying. That was just kind of what I heard. That was my understanding of my reality. Until I met a girl. I met a girl, and we were interested in each other, and she was interested in me in that way, and it was a really, really big deal, a really big transition, a really big step to take, but we did, and all of a sudden it's like, you know what? I think I've been misunderstanding this whole time, because this thing that we're doing right now is wonderful and beautiful, and it cannot be that if there is a creator, that he would create me with this desire and with these feelings, with this beauty, and then turn around and tell me that I'm evil for doing it. So that is probably the time in my life when I've most concretely made the separation from what my parents taught me versus what my experience told me.
Interesting. So it happens to everybody, and it's when you realise that your parents tell the same story over and over and over again, and it may not be a real story, or it might be a real story. You just don't actually know.
On a side note, one of my dad's if you talk to my dad to this day about Christmas, he gets visibly angry because his parents told him that Santa Claus was bringing him gifts. Like, he is a 65-year-old man, 70-year-old man, and the notion that that his parents told him about Santa Claus when he was 5 years old, still makes his face turn red to this very day.
Why, he doesn't believe in Santa Claus?
Don't tell him. He's still trying to come to terms with it, yes.
Well, we'll finish this bit with my aged mother, who passed away last year. One of her oldest friends, they had a drinks party at her house. Roaring fire, lots of people, drinks, all that sort of stuff. And somehow the subject of Father Christmas came up. And her best friend turned to the folks and say, "Oh, he doesn't come in our house anymore." And my mother looked at her, turned and looked at her with a sort of withering. She goes, "Mary, as long as I live in this house, Father Christmas will come." And my brother and I and my sister tried very hard to catch Father Christmas. Even after I'd got married the first time round, we tried to catch Father Christmas, and we never did. Not once. We never managed to catch Father Christmas.
Maybe by as long as I live in this house, Father Christmas will come, she meant something else.
Initially, my father always was a bit of a commando, if you know what I mean. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But it's interesting, that here's this woman who went through the war and all this sort of stuff. Certain things were important to her. And I don't know whether or not Father Christmas got up at 4 o'clock in the morning or what. I have no idea. But if I tell you that our stockings were at the bottom of our beds not downstairs, you have to give her kudos for knowing Father
Agreed.
Christmas. Right? Because there were times when there would have been maybe 10 people in that house. So let's move on. Talking about... We're going to do one more, I think, and that is my grandchildren are coming to visit in a few weeks' time, and I'm really looking forward to this. And I'd like to know from assembled panel, what age does the panel feel my grandchildren should be allowed to have a mobile communication device? And what rules should the adults impose? Because I want to be able to communicate with my grandchildren, let's say in 5 years' time. So what do I use? Instagram, Skype, FaceTime, Snapchat, Facebook? What do I need to know and how to use? Let's start with Kathleen.
Well, I do know that until they're about 8 months old, they'll just try to eat anything. So at least leave it till they're 8 months old.
Or get one of those little protection packs so that the drool doesn't damage the
because
technology.
as soon as they are able to grab things, they will grab yours. And it will no longer be good for anything else, so might as well give it to them.
Tyler, when do you think my grandchildren should be allowed mobile communication? And also I'd like to know, because with your many children all over the world, some of whom you know, some of whom you haven't met yet.
That's correct.
What rules do you think adults should impose on, and you work with kids, so what rules do you think ought to be imposed?
Do all of your kids have phones?
Oh yeah. And like my niece and nephew, they got a phone when they turned 10. However, they were parentally locked as far as what they could and couldn't do with a phone until they turned 13. Once they had teenage, then they had free range to do whatever the hell they wanted on the phone, because my parents, or their parents, my brother and sister-in-law, realized there's really no way we can stop these kids from using these phones. But I think the grace period between the time they were 10 to 13, that's a good time for parents to kind of make
and
sure.
how do you communicate with them?
With my students?
No,
Or
with
my
your
children?
your children or your nephews and nieces.
I call them.
Oh, you call them?
Use a telephone?
Yeah, I call them these things called phones where you can hear voices and shit. Yeah.
Do you have one of those old-timey phones that have the cord that goes all the way to the wall?
Yipper.
Wow.
Yipper.
I have one of those.
You got one with a wire?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do when the power goes out and you can't charge, that mobile one? The phone
EMP's
always
gonna
works.
fuck all y'all.
Yeah, y'all.
You know, EMP's going to take out the wired phones as well.
What? EMP ain't gonna do shit. There you go.
It ain't gonna do shit.
Okay, Lyn. Quiet Lyn from China.
I think
How do you communicate with your family back home, or do you not?
we don't talk. That's why the marriage works. It's a
That
joke.
is the best thing I've ever heard in this group. For the years I've been coming here, that's the best thing I've ever heard.
Well, I really get to know you guys better now. So, no, we know each other real well. So there's
So you don't know. But what about your family back home? You still have family in China?
yeah, my mother and my brother. I try to Skype or FaceTime, but I know what she's doing. My brother's there, and there's a WeChat, like Twitter or something, the Chinese way. So I know what's going on, but I try to limit.
Is your brother older or younger than you?
Older.
He's older.
Yeah. So he's very responsible. So yeah, I think for kids, to answer your original question, I think the later the better. That's my personal opinion. We don't have kids. We don't really know. So
That you know about?
But Chris is kind of like a kid.
Yeah.
He is a
well,
kid.
he's very responsible in a lot of departments.
That's why I say,
So-
kids don't get cell phones until they're like, 50, 60 years old. 'Cause
Most women do know whether they have a kid or not, right?
No, she said we don't have kids, and I said that you know about that. Chris's other children that she hasn't been. Anyway.
Well, yeah.
Evo, you've got 3. Well, you've inherited 1, and you have 2 of your own.
Yeah, and they are kind of separated by a lot of years, actually. So they're almost, there's a demarcation line in terms of the technological revolution between them. So the oldest one is not as attached to her communication device. I think my son is dangerously addicted to his mobile device. just like all of his peers. And I worry.
And they're all that age group.
Yeah.
They all are.
Yes, and I worry about them, not specifically about my son, about the entire generation.
Yes.
Because they, there is a very important mode of communication between human beings, the face-to-face communication, where you can actually read the non-verbal cues. Like if you say something insulting to somebody in their face or around them, there's sometimes their face will express it, or even there'll be tears, or you can read it in their eyes. That doesn't exist anymore, and that has made.
They have to do that face-to-face stuff so that they learn properly how to use emoticons.
Well, the problem is they, you don't read those
There's
cues.
an urban dictionary for learning what emoticons mean. So
Yeah, you don't read those nonverbal cues anymore, and people become more and more desensitized, more and more cynical, and crass with communicating. It's very easy to throw an insult on the as a text message, as an SMS, and I think the kids are losing this. There was a very interesting lecture recently from a very famous professor when he actually asked the kids.
Well, as famous as Dr. Orlando.
No, nobody's that famous.
Oh, right.
But,
Okay.
That's not crazy.
don't go nuts here. But he asked the kids. He asked high school kids. Within his lecture, he said, "What would you rather have? A broken phone or a broken bone?" And shockingly, 47% said that they would have a broken bone.
And they were serious.
Yes, and they said that they were serious, and they said at least when we have a broken bone, a broken arm or a leg, we can use our phone to kind of pass the time while we heal. And he said, okay, what if I offer you $100 and take your phone away for a week? Would you do this? And they said no. All the kids said no.
Wow.
He then said, what about $200? Almost all of them said no. Almost all. We're talking 90% said no. We would not exchange $200 for our phone for 1 week. And eventually he kept upping it. And eventually he reached the point where one clever student said, you know what? I'll take the $400 and then I'm going to go and buy a new one.
I can't wait. I can't wait until this generation, until they all go to retirement communities, and all they do is sit there on their phones. It's going to be like a funeral parlor in there. I'm serious.
Dude, have you been to an old
whenever
folks
with my
home?
class,
It's
with
like
my
a funeral
class,
parlor
when I
now.
get done with a lecture or something like that, we've got 5 minutes left to kill. I say, hey folks, the hour's yours. Do as you wish. It turns dead silent.
Yeah.
They all bust out their phones, and it is creepy.
Yeah.
And I know when they all get older, all they're
Yeah.
going to do
Yeah.
is sit there and look at their phones.
Yeah.
And they're going to
My
have
last
conversations with each other. across
Louis,
the
you're
table.
wrong.
Oh.
Old people in nursing
They're
homes fuck
fucking
like
now.
rabbits,
They're
man.
fucking now. I forgot.
You remember when some Republicans said it's time to decide whether you want health care or the new iPhone.
yeah.
Now, most of the people over 30 or 40 thought, well, you got to have health care, and poor people don't have iPhones anyway. People 30 and under took that seriously and thought, oh, God, I don't want to give up my iPhone.
Yeah.
I'd rather not have health care.
People on average pick up their phone 300 times a day.
They
300
did
times.
surveys. They did interviews with people on the street. They
Yeah,
would prefer
and we
not
don't
to
even
have health
notice
care.
it. We don't even notice it. That's average.
These conversations
Teenagers do it more.
always
Now, Dr.
shock
Orlando
the hell out
has
of me.
youngest children. What do you think about? What do you think about your?
My kids will possibly never get a cell phone.
Oh,
not until they buy it themselves,
My
right?
kids already
fun to
have
pretend, isn't it?
tablets.
Yeah,
What do
it's
they
fun to
need a
pretend.
cell phone for?
They'll be
They've
at a big
got
disadvantage.
pocket-sized tablets.
You know what? Their friends will buy them phones without you knowing it.
No. But here's my
serious.
point. We're talking about personal communication devices. Is there any kid, younger than the age of 5, that doesn't have a tablet right now? They don't need a phone.
Oh, you're saying that it will move towards something else. I mean,
I'm
it
saying
could be
that-
glasses, it could
Yeah,
be
it
chip,
could be anything.
something,
The question of the mobile phone is it's becoming irrelevant as far as the technology goes. But here's the thing that's driving me batty. Whenever we have one of these kinds of conversations, we've literally had everybody at this table thus far say, "Oh my God, look at these kids today! How rude they are! How cruel they are! How now they're getting more crash.
Hang on a minute. We originally called this. We originally called this Wednesday Night Undress. This is why I am now calling it Old Farts Complaining.
Nobody
No.
ever seems to realize that we are making the
Lewis,
same complaints that our parents made about us
Lewis,
and
we
their
get
parents
that.
made about them.
We get that. But technology is moving much faster now.
Much faster.
And
It's
I'm sure
exponentially
that
moving
when the
faster.
guy
It's
invented the
changing.
printing press, that was what they said about all these uppity people that started
I
reading.
remember when the Germans were bombing London. Not so long ago.
Holy shit!
A
It's
lot is-
like it's almost comical how we're literally sitting here saying kids today don't have any manners, don't know how to talk to people, don't know how to get along. And nobody questions it. Nobody is questioning the fact that we are literally making the exact same complaints that were made about us when we were 12 and 13 years old.
Literally, not the exact same complaints.
No,
not
not the
literally.
same complaints.
They're similar, but they're not the exact
I'm sorry,
same.
you're right. I literally used literally incorrectly. I apologize. But my
Literally.
point stands. We are guilty right now of saying
Okay, I just wanted
everything
a
that
show
our
of
parents said
hands
about
because I
us.
think there's only going to be one hand go up, right, other than mine. Who has had their father say to them, "You need to get a haircut," or "Get a haircut"?
Right here.
No,
No.
no,
3 out of the 6 guys here.
including the engineers.
7 guys here, sorry.
Because I find myself more and more, as my boys were growing up, from 15 through 20, saying something and then thinking, "Oh my God, that was my father speaking."
My dad has this. He still says it all the time now. The following generations will always be smarter and softer than the previous generation, and that is, I think, something that he got from his father. I didn't. My grandfather died when I was a really young kid, but I think that it is just. Whenever I hear anybody talk about how bad kids are or how different kids are, whether it's happening in 1984 or 2017, it's my very first question every single time is, how much of this is just old people complaining that they don't understand kids?
I don't know how much.
It's more than that.
But I know that there's never been more socially awkward kids than in this time right
Yeah.
now, and it's very hard to talk to young kids. Not me. People like kids their age, peers, have hard time communicating with each other. They're on the spectrum almost,
And it's not just kids. My last job, when I was actually doing engineering work, the up and coming engineers, a friend of mine would tell the story of cube mates of his, and the cubes were 4 people in a little box. He had 2 recent graduates. They were catty cornered to each other, and they would text each other on their computers. They wouldn't turn their chairs around.
yes.
I mean, they're
That's
literally
not
5
the
feet
same.
from each
That's
other,
not
and they
being
text.
social.
There's actually an
that's not the same.
expression for this. I
They
forgot what it
are
was.
being social. There is literally nothing else they're doing but socializing that whole time.
Here's a
They are
good-
having more communication with
It's
each
one
other
thing to
than we
socialize
have.
over
I
distance
heard
and a
on
device. It's another thing to
NPR
socialize
today,
when you're 5 feet from
driving
each
back
other.
after I'd done the thing about London, back from the radio station. I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about some summer course, summer school, that was sold out, and this was where people were sending their kids, and you'll never guess what the subject was.
Porn.
No, they already done that one.
Talking.
Small talk.
Aha.
It's a course on how to make.
Yeah.
But
You heard
It's
it
true.
too, did you?
I swear, the kids these
Yeah.
days are more social than any
I don't
generation
think
before
so.
them.
I don't think so because the
They're
written
not- they don't have the same
No.
interpersonal skills,
No.
without question.
Interpersonal in person,
No,
yes,
Kath.
but communication
No.
with
No,
other people
I don't-
and
I-
contact with
yeah.
other people more than ever before.
I disagree because the way they communicate
Wanna
the
fight?
text.
Step
no,
outside. Step outside.
No, the text messaging. It's all about
You messing
clever.
with my wife, are you? Are you
No,
messing with my wife?
it's all about clever quirks. It's all about small, clever responses, and it rarely,
they're
rarely,
laconic.
it rarely goes deeper.
I want to echo this as
Yeah.
well because
Yeah.
when you say communicate, they don't communicate. They're not social. Communication is you're listening and you're also giving information, but you're also respectfully listening. With what Evo's talking about, this is what they do. It's all about their quips. It's all about them, and that's why they sit there. And that's why they sit there and they're on Twitter, so they can be the ones that get all these followers. It's about them. It's not about a true communication.
So social media is a misnomer. It should be anti-social media.
Guys, good advice. Good advice I've heard recently. Try to spend some time every month. Try to spend some time with your family and your friends in an environment where you cannot tell what year it is within 10 years. Okay, so what I mean, right now, if you look around, I can tell what year it is. I can look at this, I can look at this, I can look at certain things, the flat screen TV, and I can tell approximately what year it is. Spend some time where you look around and you cannot tell what year it is within 10 years. So go in the forest.
Yeah, go outside, that's what I was about to say.
Go around nature. Go somewhere where there's nothing that can remind you of our age. It is very, very important. It's very important.
You've been listening to Wednesday Night Undressed, or otherwise known as Old Farts Complaining. I want to thank the team. What are you laughing at? Our waitress comes and laughs at us when she's bringing us steak fries that she hasn't dropped.
The truth
on the
hurts.
floor. So I want to thank Tyler. Ow! Stop hitting me. Tyler Durden.
You can't drop anything on the floor at
Transcendental Kathleen Taylor.
Everywhere.
Of course, the Black Knight of European dark pheromones, Ivo Ivanov. Lyn from China. Chris, Major, somebody or other has never been in the army. Magerkurth. Thank you, Chris, for coming in. The things that this man does. You know he's an expert in cheese. Did you know
we
that?
have to
he's
mention.
An expert in cheese. It's amazing.
Before we wrap it up, we have to mention Chris has Powerpuff Girls dressed as Clockwork Orange characters on his T-shirt. That is the best T-shirt I've ever seen in my life.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Amazing.
The inimitable Dr. Orlando, and I'd like to thank Eric, the producer. Broken. He has his own music. If you listen to our show on Fridays and Saturdays, you will hear me play his own theme song. And of course, Neil
Rasmussen, another Viking name.
Another Viking name. It's scary how these Swedes are trying to take over, isn't it?
Yeah.
And again, you've been listening to Wednesday Night Undressed, or Old Farts Complaining. You can catch us on iTunes, and of course, if you're listening to that, you know that already. Yay!